So we've got a bunch of new information about the Expanse, Osiris Reborn, the upcoming game by Owlcat Games. This game looks the closest to a Mass Effect style game that we are going to get anytime soon, as Mass Effect 5 seems pretty far off, and I just don't believe that Exodus is going to be that game, if you want me to be totally frank. So I want to jump into a summary by another content creator, and we'll talk about everything in there and how I'm feeling about it. Let's get into it. Okay, so here we have a breakdown of this new interview with the developers of The Expanse, Osiris Reborn. This is by Shinobi602. If you follow games on Twitter or Blue Sky at all, you know who Shinobi is. They are a really, really great source of information and news for stuff like this. He I don't think makes like videos or streams or anything. He just posts things on here, and he posts really good looking food and recipes that he's made. So let's jump into it. So this is from a developer interview that was done. The link is down below. I will try to remember to put that link down in the description of this video if you want to watch the whole thing yourself, but we'll go through point by point in the things that he kind of summarized here. So around 30 to 40 hours of gameplay depending on how you play. That's awesome, because it sounds like, and we'll talk about more as we go through these points, that there's going to be a lot of ways to make different choices and have different outcomes and things like that. So a fairly tight 30 to 40 hour game that if you want to go through and play it multiple times, it's not a big like 100 or 100+ hour experience. This makes that a lot more engaging, or a lot more tempting to go through and do multiple playthroughs, which is perfect. A big part of this game is that I hope the Mass Effect team takes a lot of inspiration for the choices that are being made for this game, because this is what I want from the next Mass Effect game. I don't need the next Mass Effect game to be a big 100-hour epic. I can take a 20, 30, 40-hour game, especially if the hope or the idea is to make more games beyond that. So 30 to 40 hours, a play style preset system with flexibility to experiment. For example, a player in a sniper role can use a shoulder cannon they come across. So this just basically means that, in my opinion, that we just aren't going to be super locked into whatever pre kind of built role that you pick. I assume there's going to be different classes essentially. So like they said, kind of like you can be a sniper or an assault person or something like that, but you're still going to be able to do the things the other ones do. This is kind of how like Mass Effect Andromeda is to a point. Obviously you kind of focus in on a certain way to play and a certain build, but it doesn't necessarily completely negate your ability to do other things as well. In fact, Andromeda was very encouraging of having multiple different builds and multiple different setups and presets and things like that. Encouraged to experiment with new guns, gadgets, skills, etc., but the player will need to commit at some point during the game. Can't switch it up forever. So it's kind of like that Andromeda example of like, you can kind of dabble in various things as you play through the game, but you know, if you want to be as powerful as you probably need to be at the end of the game, you do have to focus in at some point. So that sounds good to me. Filled with choices to make, maybe some occasional hints about major choices, but the game won't warn the player. This is one of those things where the first playthrough of a game like this is always the most impactful, because after you've played it once, you'll kind of know, for the most part, where the big choices are coming and what the different results are going to be. One of my greatest regrets about my first Mass Effect playthrough is that I didn't play it completely blind. When I got to the second game, because I finished the first game in my first playthrough in like 8 hours. I just mainlined the main story like to an extreme degree, where in the second game, because I had heard about the suicide mission, I spent way too much time looking at guides to make sure no one died. And in hindsight, I wish I wouldn't have done that, because I think, and ever since, I've told people when oh, what's your hints for my first playthrough of Mass Effect, is don't look at any hints, just play it. Just play it the best you can without any help at all, and play it through Mass Effect 3 and just see what kind of crap show you're dealing with at the end, because I wish I would have experienced that. So with this situation, I'm glad that we're going to be making choices and that those choices will matter. I think it's realistic to look at it though and be like, after the first playthrough, which you should do completely blind, then subsequent playthroughs are going to be informed, obviously, and that's okay. That's they can't make games have infinite possibilities. Not all choices lead to major plot changes, sometimes just flavor for the dialogue. That's pretty typical in most of the RPGs we've seen and things like that. Character customization. So you can pick to be an Earther, a Belter, or a Martian. I've watched a good chunk of the show. Earthers are basically just normal people for the most part, people who grew up on Earth. Belters are people who grew up in low gravity situations. So the series portrays them often as being very, very tall, like 7 foot plus on average, but being really, really weak when they're in normal gravity situations, because their bodies are used to low gravity and because their muscles are stretched out and things like that. Then the Martians, if I remember correctly, they grow up in a higher than normal gravitational situation, if I remember correctly. So they tend to be kind of normal human size, but to be very strong and things like that. I could be wrong, but that I assume that's going to be the differences we see in the choices you make. You get to choose whether the character you play as is male or female, the type of body type they have, facial customization. And remember, a big part of this game is that you're going to be playing, that you will have an identical sibling in the game. So if you pick to be a male Earther, your sibling will also be a male Earther. If you choose to be a female Belter, then, the same thing. So I'm glad, in a game like this, I think customization of the character is very important. And I'm glad that it's involved here, and that it seems like there's going to be a pretty extensive amount of customization you can do. Here it says every companion has their own background, factions, struggles, and goals, opinions on every major plot event, sometimes providing advice or even suggesting military support. So say one of your people on your ship or one of your companions is a Martian who has connections to the Martian military. And maybe you're in good enough standing with the Martian military that they'll help you out in maybe the final mission or something like that. Like, I assume that's what that means. The whole idea of them having their own backgrounds and all that stuff, it's kind of what we've seen in all the major RPGs in this kind of genre. They like it says in the next thing, you can choose to help or ignore your companion's stories. So that's going to be like loyalty missions and things like that, I assume. And like we've seen in games like Mass Effect, the trilogy, and Andromeda, if you choose to flesh out their stories and try to finish up whatever business they have, it will likely be good for them in the long run and good for for you. And if you ignore it, it's probably bad for them. And then that comes to the next point. Some companions can die depending on your choices. So this kind of plays back to, maybe they'll have some gimmick or some unique mechanic here, but more than likely, if you don't level them up, if you don't complete their side stories, they're more likely to die or not be helpful. It says there will definitely be romance in the game. So if you've watched the show, it's a very sex oriented show. They don't hide that part of human nature, and I suspect that's going to be a part of this game as well. Companions can disagree with you about choices, dynamic relationships among themselves, traveling in a tight ship for long periods of time. So this is cool, and this is something I've actually talked about for the next Mass Effect that I hope we get, in that that not only will your choices impact how your crewmates feel about you and feel about each other, that could lead to things. So the idea that if you upset one of your companions or one of your crew members, if you make a choice they don't like, maybe at the end of the game they like betray you and sabotage your crew and then abandon you or even fight against you. Like, I've talked a lot about how in the next Mass Effect, I hope that you can only romance certain partners if you fit their type. So if you're kind of a bad guy and you make choices that tend to be bad for other people, maybe there's a companion who's really into you doing that kind of thing. Maybe they're kind of evil themselves. And then that locks you out of other characters who are more, good people, and they don't like that. Where in the, in most games nowadays, and even the Mass Effect trilogy, as long as you can be awful or really, really good, and everyone will bang you if you make the right dialogue choices, right? So, I like this idea. Now, people are going to struggle with this because they're going to say, well, then I have to play a very certain way to be able to romance or be friendly with this character. Yeah, that's how people work. That was always my gripe about. I have no issue with video games allowing relationships between, people of the same sex or whatever. My issue, like in a game like Mass Effect, the trilogy, is that it's just weird for like everyone on the ship is thirsting for you, no matter what you do, no matter what you are, no matter what your preference is, your character is or theirs. And even in Mass Effect, there's always this conversation of like, oh, it's stupid that a female shepherd can't romance Tally, and like I get it, and there's mods that people have done to make that work, and that's fine. But I kind of like that the characters occasionally have their own preferences and are allowed to have those preferences. And we aren't just expecting every single other person in the game to be thirsting for us the way, say, like in Baldur's Gate 3. I don't think it hurts the game if you do that. It's fine. It's no problem. It's probably good for players, if anything. But I do think it's more interesting to have a cast of crewmates that maybe aren't into you no matter what you do. I think that's okay. And maybe even it encourages people to play different play styles and different playthroughs. But regardless, I love that it seems like the relationship, whether it's romances or just crew members, are dynamic, and that they have issues between each other and you, and the choices you make and the things you do, and that can lead to bad things. I love that, and that's something I hope the next Mass Effect does as well. Says, because the Expanse is more grounded, there's emphasis on how tech, weapons, ships, space travel, radiation, etc. all realistically function. That's awesome. That's definitely. I'm not a high fantasy guy. Like, I liked Avowed last year, but I preferred the Outer Worlds too. I liked Dragon Age, the Veil Guard, but I prefer Mass Effect. Like, it's kind of in that thing, and that's why I think I'm so attracted to this game. Abilities, offensive and defensive grenade, shoulder cannon, shield, protective drone, mini gadgets to pick from. So if you've seen the show, or a game I would compare this to, that this game looks a lot like gameplay wise, is The Division, which is so exciting for me because I'm really bummed that The Division is this kind of mindless looter shooter. I really, back to that 2013 trailer, always wish that the Division would be more of like a Mass Effect style RPG, because its combat I think fits that so well. And then the fact that like your character is a voiceless character and you don't get to make any choices because it's an online looter shooter where everyone needs to be in the same safe state. Like, I just think that kind of blows, because I think there's a lot more potential there for that kind of a game. And it looks like the Expanse Osiris Reborn is giving me basically that Mass Effect, the Division mashup, and their skill system, their ability system seems to really mirror in a lot of ways the one that the Division uses, which is so exciting for me. It looks so good. You can use a playstyle that focuses more on gadgets more than weapons. So you can do this in the Division as well. My main build in the Division is one where I throw like a remote turret and these like seeker mines as my primary way of interacting with enemies. I can shoot them too, but I only shoot them because me shooting them makes my skills more powerful. It seems like you're going to be able to kind of do that here as well, which is super exciting to me. And again, really pushes that idea of replayability and making different choices, having different romances, and working with different crew members, being good or bad. I just, it's very exciting for me. It says inspired by games like Mass Effect, Persona, Final Fantasy, Souls, etc. Cover shooting gameplay by games like The Division and Gears of War. I didn't even see that when I read through this the first time. AI companions by games like Uncharted and The Last of Us. So, realistic feeling companions in those games. The combat of The Division, yes. And then obviously the RPG aspects of those other games. Oh, man, so cool. So you can explore the belt. Some things have been hidden or forgotten through time. So I assume they haven't. I don't think they've shown yet exactly how we're going to be interacting with the world. Like the ship. Like, are we going to fly the ship manually, or is it going to be like a Mass Effect system where you have like a star map and you pick where the ship goes? But it seems like there will be exploration of non-mission areas. So I assume side missions and side things that you can discover on your own, which is kind of standard fare for this genre. But if it's done in an organic way, the way Star Wars Outlaws did a good job of that, where they had the main missions that you would go through, but you really discovered a lot of side missions by just overhearing conversations and reading, computer logs and things like that. And you would discover a lot of side content that way, or just you would just happen upon it in the world. I love that. That's good stuff to me. It says multiple major social hubs on planets and space stations, hang out with companions, drink at bars, shop for gear. So we've seen this in the previews already, that, and if you've seen the show, you know that there's a number of, space stations and planets that have big hubs and cities. So I'm assuming this is going to be a very Mass Effect style hub and mission style game, where we have, a half dozen or more hubs that you go to, and that's where you discover missions or do companion missions, or do these things that it's talking about. And then you'll say like, okay, now I'm gonna go do this mainline mission, and it's a, you travel to it, and you get dropped off on this, fairly linear mission area, and you do the mission, then you go back to the ship and repeat, right? Which is perfect. That's what I want. I don't need this game to be some crazy big open world where you have like 4 planets that have kind of open world areas, cough cough Andromeda. I'm totally cool with them having some very focused, maybe 4 or 5 hubs that are very focused, and that's what they're for. And then, spending the time to flesh out these, fairly linear missions. That's fine. That's what I want. That's actually what I want from the next Mass Effect as well. There are things in side quests that can impact your playthrough. So like, that's kind of a standard fare in this genre. You can just mainline the game if you want. I bet you'll finish it in like 15 or 20 hours. But if you do the side stuff, it will impact the main story and the ending, which the Outer Worlds 2 is such a good example of that. The way that game played out, it really did reward, at least in my experience, doing the side missions and side tasks, because at the end you could end up basically soloing the end of that game, or if you did what I did, you make friends with everybody, you have this like huge amount of support from all these different factions and people. It was really cool, and I hope that's what happens here as well. It says then the final thing here is some choices you can have, some choices you make can have a visual effect or change locations, characters, etc. So we're talking about probably planets. Maybe a planet becomes toxic or stays clean because of a choice you make. Maybe a character gets severely injured or has scars or something from an event that happens, that if you make different choices, that thing doesn't happen, right? As well as them potentially dying and things like that. So that's great. Combined with all these other things, that's what I want. So yeah, reading through that again, I mean, I've been dreaming of a Mass Effect, The Division kind of combined type game. I've been hoping and talking about for a while now that I hope the next Mass Effect is that kind of game, and it kind of seems like that's what we're getting with the Expanse Osiris Reborn. That's really exciting. I don't think this game is expected until 2027, though when I was looking around, I couldn't actually find any defined dates, or I don't know if they've really said anything. If it comes here in 2026, that would just be, that would be perfect. I would love that. But I'm not going to be mad if it doesn't. These things take time, and that's okay. There's other games to play this year, and I can survive that. But more than anything, I'm actually so excited this game is going to be coming out in a time that's likely right dab in the middle of Mass Effect 5 development, because I really, really, really hope a lot of inspiration and a lot of encouragement or ideas are spawned off of what they're doing here in that game. Because like I said, obviously you never want them to just copy another game, but the things this game is trying to do, and if they land the ship, if they're able to do the things they say, which you do have to be a little skeptical always, and they've never really made a game like this before. Their other games have been more typical, like CRPGs and stuff like that. If they can land this ship, this is going to be the closest thing to a modern Mass Effect game that we've ever seen. Previous examples of that would be something like like Guardians of the Galaxy, which luckily the writer of that game is working on Mass Effect. Having that kind of modern version of the old Mass Effect formula, which is getting pretty long in the tooth at this point. I hope this is what it says it's going to be, and I hope that it's a preview of what we may get from a new Mass Effect game. There's my spiel. In the comments, let me know what you think, what you're thinking of the Expanse Osiris Reborn, how you think it may inspire the next Mass Effect. If you like this video, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one. If you really want to support what I'm doing, become a YouTube member. You are able to get videos like this one just a bit early, as well as some other perks. If you want other ways to support what I'm doing here, check out the links in the video description. I've got other content in there. I've got other ways to support. I've also got my Extra Life campaign link in there. I'm raising money for children's hospitals. This year, we're at $100 already at the time of recording. My goal is 1,000 this year. If we hit that goal, we'll go even higher. And I'm going to be adding in some incentives for people, whether it's giveaways or me doing like marathon streams or something like that. We'll figure it out. I've got to figure out what I have time and money for, but I really appreciate it. Thanks for watching. That's all I have for this one. So until next time.